All right. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. So where we're going to be picking up is on page 118. And we're 118, third full paragraph, about halfway down the page. And just a reminder, we're in the chapter Two Wives. But where we're at this point in the chapter is somewhere actually kind of really exciting. The alcoholic has made the transition from active alcoholism to it is implicit that the alcoholic has taken the course of action, the 12 steps as outlined in this book, and is now sober and living this way of life. So I say that to point out the context with which we're at in this book. Now, it says, and I hope this is, and I know this is going to be not news for anyone in the meeting here today, and I hope it's not any news for Ben. It says, we women carry with us the picture of the ideal man. So I hope that's not a surprise for him. Like, my wife does what now? Right? So, and I know nobody here can relate to being in a relationship with somebody and having an ideal of who we think they need to be. Now it says, the sort of chap we would like our husbands to be. I'm going to point something out. Now this comes from earlier in the book, in the work. The sex ideal that we develop, that we create through the sex inventory columns, through prayer, through meditation, it's not so much about the other person. I know. It's about who I need to be before, during, and after a relationship. So it's acknowledging that thing that when we're in a relationship, we have those people, or what comes to mind is those people that we think, our partners need to be. And it says, it is the most natural thing in the world once his liquor problem is solved. And I want us to point out solved. That's what we mean when we talk about recovered. The problem is solved. Now, keep in mind, depending on how I do for time, and knowing me, probably not well, so maybe next week, we're going to be talking about one of the few places in the book that talk about what do you do after somebody has relapsed after coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I say it's one of the only few places in the book because there's like 3, 4 if we pull from Dr. Bob's Nightmare. There's not many places, and the reason is it doesn't happen. And you might be like, girl, are you going to the same meetings I'm going to? It happens. But it does not happen that often when we are following the directions as outlined in this book. So again, I want to point out solved, recovered. That's the state that we get to be in. And welcome those who just joined us. And hold on, welcome all who just joined us, because I didn't want to start that. And then we're on page 118, third paragraph. So once his liquor problem is solved, to feel he will now measure up. And I got some news. It is human, like the book is saying, we do that. But it is unfair for me to create a cosmic ruler with which I measure you by. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's unfair that I hold you to what I have deemed to be important, or who I think you need to be. And I can tell you, it's painful when people have done that to me. I don't measure up to much other people's standards, so it doesn't work. You can try, but girl, I'm not that tall when it comes to standards. I'm not that person. But it says it is the most natural thing in the world to feel that he will now measure up to that cherished vision. And here's the book meeting us where we're at, that very human thing. Well, my person is now sober. They're recovered members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Of course, they're now going to put the toilet paper on the correct way and never leave their socks out. Of course, that's what's going to happen. And so the book, again, meeting us where we're at, and going to take us where we need to go. The chances are he will not. Romp, romp. What do you mean they're not perfect now that they got sober? Which is to extrapolate, what do you mean I'm not perfect now that I got sober? It says, chances are he will not. For like yourself, he is just beginning his development. So welcome, we're on page 118, third full paragraph. And it says, when it says like yourself, he is just beginning his development. What we're talking about is the thrust of the main, like there's been a couple directions that we have seen again and again and again. And one of those directions that we see reiterated and repeated is the most powerful message that I can carry, regardless of who the person is to be a powerful demonstration of these 12 steps in my life. So that sentence is pointing out that like yourself, whoever you are reading this book, it is implicit that I would be working these steps as a way of life myself. And I want to point something out. When it says, for like yourself, he is just beginning his development. What I want to point out is that the alcoholic is recovered at this point in time. The action of getting to that step 10, 11, and 12 place, that wasn't taking a long time. They were going through the work quickly and thoroughly. Those two things are meant to work together. But when it says just beginning his development, we don't mean starting his fourth step. We mean beginning this lifelong way of life. And that's what we're trying to emphasize. This is a way of life. These 12 steps, many of you know, it's not a set it and forget it program. You guys have heard me say, I can't have crockpot sobriety, even though we're getting into soup season. Actually, probably in South Carolina and Georgia, you're like, it's absolutely not soup season. I'm sweating. But up here, we're like, please don't snow, like we're in that. So it's soup season and I want to have crackpot sobriety. I want to set it and forget it. You know what I mean? I want to do a 4 through 9, all done. Don't got to worry about it. That's the kind of sobriety that I want to have. But unfortunately, man, that doesn't work. I can't have that type of sobriety. What I need is that stir-fry sobriety where I'm up there and I'm stirring it constantly. I'm working it constantly on a daily basis. That's the type of sobriety that I need to have and that I'm called to have. And I apologize if some of you are like, well, now I'm really hungry. I hope you've had dinner for those of you in the Eastern time zone. And I'm so sorry for those of us on the West Coast that are like, hey, we might not have eaten yet. I'm hungry. My bad. But that's the idea, that I've got to have a daily program of action. That this is a way of life. And here's the thing. That might not sound like good news. Like if you're here and you're like just starting on this journey, like we're just starting on our 4 through 9, or we're just on 1, 2, 3, we're not far in this journey. That might sound like I have proposed just the worst possible thing. What do you mean? I've got to do this the rest of my life? No, But here's what I know to be true. Is the steps are awful before I take them, but on the other side of them, they are the actions that allow me to live a life better than I have ever known. They are the actions that allow me to live free and in the here and now. And the wildest thing is the more that I do them, the less scary, the less awful they become. And in fact, they are things that I look forward to doing. I know some of you are like, I don't believe you. That liar who invited her, Vivian, liar. But I promise you, I have that hoodie. I'm wearing my Throckmorton. I'm not wearing my other hoodie, but I got a hoodie that says inventory behooves me. Cause it does. Cause there's times I'm like, man, I can't wait to take that through the columns, or I can't wait to spend time in prayer and meditation or to help someone. Man, I remember years ago, this was 2018, maybe 2017, maybe even 2016. I don't know when it was, pre-COVID. And I was on a vacation with a friend. And we were out there, we were kind of doing touristy things. And I remember feeling like that spiritual itch. But that itch was like, man, I got to sit down with somebody and read the doctor's opinion. I was yearning for that. And the more that I do, the more skilled I am, so the less time it takes, and the more that I experience, the more that I get to draw nearer to this power, to experience this power. There's no glass ceiling on this thing. I get to experience it. So, page 118, third paragraph, very bottom line, be patient. Be patient. And if you're struggling to be patient, one of the best ways, I know not you guys, pinnacle of patience over here, but me, one of the best ways that I can be patient is leaning in to my own spiritual program of action. That's how I will grow in my patience, worrying about what I'm doing and how I can help others. All right, it goes on to say, another feeling we are likely to entertain. Now, I also want to point out that when we're talking about that like ideal man, I've worked with sponsees who have had partners, spouses that were in the program. I worked with a sponsee who she and her husband had been in and out of AA for almost 30 years. And so, and when we were going through this part of the book, she's like, yeah, I have this little idea of who this guy needs to be, and he's not doing it, right? Again, I am sitting in the director's chair trying to give everyone their lines and their costumes and all of the stuff. It's me in the delusion of playing God. It goes on to say, another feeling we are likely to entertain, and this is another human feeling. And it's important to understand. So when we go through Two Wives, we go through it through a whole bunch of different lenses that really makes this chapter go from something that's gross, it doesn't apply to me, it's sexist, I don't like it, to wow, there's information here, there's depth here, there's power here, there's an experience here. It makes this chapter come alive. And one of the things that can be helpful is to then come back to our roles in life as alcoholics and to imagine that this is how we affect others as well. So we'll have that lens as we go through this paragraph, as well as a couple others. But it says, another feeling we are very likely to entertain is one of resentment, that love and loyalty could not cure our husbands of alcoholism. That idea that love is not enough. And that was actually the movie with Winona Ryder about Lois Wilson. And if you're ever wanting to get an interesting lens of like the different perspectives of Al-Anon and AA, you go put on the movie that My Name is Bill W. It's got James Woods, and you'll watch it, and I think Gary Sinise, and you'll watch it and be like, you can do it, Bill, get sober, yeah, go Bill. And then you pop on Lois Remembers and you're like, leave him, you can do so much better. It's the perspectives, but that idea that it is understandable that there would be resentment when the alcoholic recovers, that they are now living this amazing, wonderful life, and it's like, why wasn't my love enough? Why wasn't it enough to do it for me, for the kids, for the family? Why wasn't I enough? And it is understandable that they would feel that hurt. And it is understandable that we would also feel confused or guilty, that like when we're in the madness and the obsession is on us and it takes us back again and again and again to the first drink, and we pull ourselves out of the puke and the desperation, and we pull our heads up and we swear we're never going to do it again. And we look back and it's like, why wasn't the love of my kids, my family, my spouse, my partner, why wasn't it enough? This is baffling about alcoholism. It baffles us. So how could we not offer kindness for those who might also be confused and who would feel this way? It goes on to say, we do not like the thought that the contents of a book or the work of another alcoholic has accomplished in a few weeks that for which we struggled for years. And so what I want to point out is, how do I get well in Alcoholics Anonymous? How do I recover? Well, it's telling us the contents of a book or the work of another alcoholic, that 12-step work. So how I recover in AA, how I get well in AA, is through the actions of the 12 steps as they're outlined in this book, Alcoholics Anonymous. That's how I recover. And it's wonderful to, have friends and fellowship. And I always say meetings are great. Please know I am not anti-meeting. I, from the get-go, have loved meetings. When you were growing up, and maybe you guys didn't have this, but when I was growing up, my mom would be like, I hope you have a kid that's just like you, when I was on her last nerve, and I don't think I ever thought this in my head, but now in my head, I'm like, yeah, awesome, woo. But for some reason, like in sponsorship, I've not had sponsees that are just like me. There were times I would get sponsees that for the life of me, I couldn't get them to go to meetings. And I still have some where it's like, go to meetings. But meetings are not the solution. Meetings are not the answer. The solution is the spiritual awakening. And how I get there is the 12 steps out of this book. And what I also want to point out is that, no better, no worse. Absolutely. It goes on to say, accomplished in a few weeks. In a few weeks. What I want to emphasize is it does not take long to get well in Alcoholics Anonymous. It does not take long to take the actions of the steps. It does not take long to have a spiritual awakening. It does not take long to get well. And if you're here today, that might sound like two things. One, a little scary, because it's like, I got to do the things that I'm afraid to. I go to a meeting and we get a lot of people from a treatment center, and they'll say, and actually this is one of the things I've heard for years, I'm nowhere near step, whatever the step of the week is. I'm nowhere near that step. And it's like, it doesn't take long to get from where we are to there. It doesn't. And that might be really scary, because let's be honest, the steps are a course of action that, again, if I have not taken them, they look scary. I don't want to do them. They look like work. You know what I mean? I don't want to do it. And that is, spoilers, how all of us feel. I mean, maybe not, maybe one of you. Maybe one of you was jazzed from the get-go. I wasn't. I was terrified of it, But the hope in that is that we can get through that stuff that feels scary. And we can get through that stuff that feels like, man, I don't want to do it. And we can get to that other side where we see that freedom, we see the utility, we see the purpose, and we're free. And if you're here today and you're new, and if you're here today and you're coming back in and out, or if you're here today and the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous has left, where you've been sober a while and everyone is doing it wrong. Doesn't matter whether it's in the meetings or on the road or at the supermarket or at work or with the socks or the toilet paper. They're doing it wrong. If I'm there, what I want you to know is it does not take long to get well. It does not take long to recover. And that is available to each and every one of us. So I'm going to read the sentence again because we're talking about it. And if I break it down too much, we might lose its total meaning. So we do not like the thought that the contents of a book or the work of another alcoholic has accomplished in a few weeks that which we struggled for years. So years of me trying on my own cannot do it. But a spiritual awakening that happens as the result of the 12 steps. That's what does it. And it doesn't take long. So it says, at such moments, we forget. Now, this is another important line, that alcoholism is an illness over which we could not possibly have had any power. No human power is sufficient. And oftentimes we talk about no human power, being powerless. But what does that mean? What does that mean? It means that if I do not have a spiritual awakening, I will drink again. It doesn't matter how loved I am by my family. It doesn't matter how much I love my family. It doesn't matter the education I get, the job that I get, the job that I leave, the relationship that I get in, all the stuff that I try, all the psychoanalysis, which can be very, very important to do, all the therapy, all the counseling, all the gym, all of that, none of that is sufficient to keep me sober. Doesn't matter how many meetings, although some go, please do go, doesn't matter all of that. Nothing less than a spiritual experience. Only the power of the universe can keep an alcoholic sober. That's what we're up against. And when I see that, a couple things. One, it helps me to see that step one experience that I'm going to drink again unless I have this experience. That concession that, oh no, I have to stay sober. I want to stay sober. I need to stay sober, but I will not stay sober. That step one experience. But also it helps. And it helps with that guilt and that shame that we might be feeling if we're new. And that guilt and that shame that why isn't my love for my family enough? Why isn't my love for my kids enough? Why isn't enough? Am I just this awful garbage human being that I promised myself and I promised everyone in my life I would never drink again, and I drank again? Why am I this piece of garbage? And it's not that we are awful. It is not that we are immoral. It is not that we are unworthy. It is not that we are broken. We are simply up against an illness which no human power is sufficient. Nothing less than God will satisfy somebody like me. And that's been my experience. And so if that's like, that helps us to know that it's not that I'm bad, I am ill. And I also want to talk about, I really emphasize the word illness. And I train my brain, actually. I say illness a whole bunch. And a lot of people will use the word disease. So I want to talk about that real quick, just because my brain's on that little tangent. And there's no correcting anyone. So I use the word illness and other people use the word disease. Alcoholism has been listed as a disease in the American Medical and American Psychiatric Associations since like the 40s. And we can thank Marty Mann. She's a bad A girl. I'm trying to not swear. But she was great. She was a pioneer in like alcohol reform, like not alcohol reform, in getting alcoholism seen and classified as a disease. But I use the word illness, and and again, no one who uses disease is wrong. Me using illness does not make me right, but what's the difference? A disease is a diagnosis from a doctor. An illness is the patient's report of their own symptoms. Many of us have been called and told we had a drinking problem, we're alcoholics for a long time, and that don't mean nothing. Boink, it bounces off. Step one, I've got to concede to my innermost self. I'm the one that needs to be convinced. I need to see myself in the symptoms and the symptoms within me. So that's why I use the word illness. And if you use disease, you're right. It's okay. I'm not correcting anyone. I just wanted to explain why I use that language. So, your husband will be the first to say it was your devotion and care which brought him to the point where he could have a spiritual experience. Without you, he would have gone to pieces long ago. I do need to be alive to have a spiritual experience. And there were people that helped. And so it's that thing that, like, for our loved ones that feel that desperate feeling that they were not enough, that we can come in and offer that reassurance. Man, you loved me when no one else could. If we had those people in our lives, you were there for me, and the people that set boundaries with us, we can thank them for that too, even though we didn't like it at the time. How do you know you're helping an alcoholic? Probably because they're mad at you. That's just broad strokes on that, but just throw that out there. So. Now, it says, when resentful thoughts come, try to pause and count your blessings. And what's an interesting thing is that is a direction. And you know what it is? It's a gratitude list. That's exactly what it is. And it's a funny thing because I'm a big book gal, and I'll hear people say the gratitude list, it's not in the book, and then I get to be a dink and I'm like, actually, page 119. Now I will say if I am an alcoholic, I have to do 4-column inventory. But there's no harm in doing gratitudes. There's no harm in it. If I try to stay sober on only gratitudes, that ain't gonna work. But there's no harm in it. In fact, I'm going to share with you something. I was a home group that I was a part of for a long time. We would get a lot of women from a local treatment center. And the local treatment center had this thing where at the treatment center, now Tradition 6 says we're not affiliated, so I shouldn't have had to do this. But if you swore that you had to say 3 affirmations, well, I used to swear quite a bit, and I was somebody, you were not getting affirmations from me, and so, and it's like, and I would be like, hey, tradition 6, you can't make me do affirmations. And then when they pull it out of me, they'd be passive aggressive affirmations, and I'm still not naturally an affirmations person. But what opened me up to the idea of even doing them was to frame them as a prayer. Thank you, God, for. And when it comes to gratitudes, that is the perfect way I can take a gratitude and turn it into a prayer. Thank you, God, for my family. Thank you, God, for my sobriety. Thank you, God, for the sunset. Thank you, God, for my health. Thank you, God, for this moment. That changes everything. And it brings me back again to that right proportion. Everything that I have is not the result of me. It's a result of a power beyond myself. And I know this to be true because of years of trying to do it my way did not work. The best I could get was suicidal. The best I could get was sweatpants behind a dumpster. And maybe both my shoes, if I tied them tight enough, right? That's the best that I could do. But what happens is I take a course of action that I don't like, that I don't believe in, that I do not think will help, and I change despite myself. And nothing less than God is going to work for somebody like me. And it goes on to say, after all, your family is reunited. Alcohol is no longer a problem, and you and your husband are working together toward an undreamed of future. Now, it's an interesting thing because all these promises, I'm talking about whether or not this is a promise. If you feel like highlighting and calling a promise, you do it. And if you don't, whatever. Doesn't matter. But here's what I'll say. All the promises are not speculative. They are not what we think will happen when you get halfway through your amends. We think this will happen. All of the promises are reports of our experiences after we took the actions. So, when it talks about our family being reunited, not every family will be reunited. That might not be possible in all cases. But that idea that this way of life can bring families who would not be together. That alcohol is no longer a problem. And that we get to work with a partner, with a spouse, with whoever's in our life toward an undreamed of future. Now, again, you guys know how I like to tie things together. So at page 119 right here, working together toward an undreamed of future. You can make a little note to see page 100 because the ideas in this chapter 2 Wives are not separate ideas. It's not the directions in Alcoholics Anonymous and then brand new information. It is a continuation. So let's go to page 100, and where we're going to check out is probably one of my favorite promises in the book. And to be fair, I would say that about almost all of them. So page 100, first full paragraph. Both you and the new man, so the sponsee, the person we're working with, must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. Again, going to be pedantic. It's spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Not progress, not perfection. That is an important distinction. I am called to grow spiritually. All those external things, I think I got the job, I got the car, I got the relationship, I got the condo, I got the whatever. I don't know. I don't got none of those. But it's like I get all these material things and I'm like, look, I'm progressing, but none of those things had the power to keep me sober. So what matters is how am I progressing spiritually? And it says, if you persist, remarkable things will happen. And here it is. When we look back, we realize the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. What happens when we take this course of action is we put ourselves in God's hands, and it's this undreamed of future. It goes on to say, follow the dictates. Dictates sound like rules. I don't like those. Follow the 12 steps. That's what it is. Follow the dictates of a capital H, capital P, higher power. And you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. That's what's promised to us. This whole thing is so much more than just don't drink. Because I can't just don't drink. You know what I'm saying? That's what's available, and it is, again, not an idea, not an opinion, not speculative. It is a report of our experiences. So back to page 119, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to the first full paragraph, still another difficulty. So what's happening is this part of the book, we're bringing up problems that the family will face when the alcoholic is recovered. We're going to see that continued in the chapter, The Family Afterward. Spoilers when we get there, which will be a little while because it always takes me longer than it should. But spoilers. And then giving us the solutions. So it's bringing the problem and giving the solution. So it says, still another difficulty is that you may become jealous of the attention he bestows on other people, especially alcoholics. And so what we're trying to talk about is that tendency for alcoholics to spend a lot of time helping other alcoholics in 12-step work. And let's see what it says about 12-step work. It says, you have been starving for his companionship, which is understandable. I mean, at best, we've been emotionally unavailable. Let alone, I would go missing for weeks at a time, which is the epitome of physically unavailable as well. Where's Paige? We don't know. Usually behind a dumpster. If we checked occasionally I was in a ditch, like a lady. Anywho, I'm joking, but I was. Anywho, there was a couple times I was long times I was under bridge. Focus. Alrighty. The focus is always for me. Alrighty. So, you have been starving for his companionship, yet he spends long hours helping other men and their families. And this is telling us 12-step work is meant to be inconvenient. If I'm not at least a little inconvenienced, I'm not saying that I can't have hobbies. I'm not saying we can't. In fact, we're going to see it's going to say, spend time with your family, of course. But it's got to be a little inconvenient. And if it's not, I either don't have enough sponsees or I'm not working with them intensively enough. Just a little bit inconvenient. You still got to watch the WNBA finals. That's okay, you know? Alrighty. So it says, you feel he should now be yours. The fact is, so we're saying like that is a human emotion. The person is now sober. I've been starved for love and affection and attention. And it's like, of course you would feel like, please just give me some of that. But here's the fact. The fact is that he should work with other people to maintain his sobriety. I cannot maintain my sobriety if I'm not sponsoring others. Sponsoring others is a part of the deal. Now, I point that out not to shame anyone. So if you're here today and you're like, I've not sponsored, or I'm not sponsoring, or I don't know how to sponsor, please let us help you. Like, that's what we're here to do. To help you sponsor others, because, man, this is an experience you don't want to miss. And it will bring you to places you never thought possible. So it says, we need to, I have to, this is a must. It doesn't say the word must, but I'll let you know it's getting a little musty in here. I should open a window like it's musty. I gotta do it. And so it says, sometimes he will be so interested that he becomes really neglectful, which again tells us that, and we're going to dive, this paragraph is going to be extrapolated a whole deal in the chapter, The Family Afterward. Your house is filled with strangers. In the old days, we'd be like detoxing them in the house. We don't have to do that. Medical help, absolutely necessary. But, you know, sponsees coming in and out, or video calls with sponsees, you know, like it's that you're always working with people, right? You may not like some of them. What? You mean an unrecovered alcoholic might not be the most pleasant person to have around? What? I know, I'm as shocked by this as you guys. Oh, and we'll be fine with it, you know? Like, we'll be like, yeah, that's just Garbage Pail Tony. He's coming over. It's like, why is Garbage Pail Tony coming to the house? No, it'll be great. Who doesn't love Garbage Pail Tony? Like, I just want to conceptualize what we're like to non-alcoholic people, you know? Oh, so he gets stirred up about their troubles, but not at all about yours. You will do little good if you point this out and urge more attention for yourself. Now, for those of us reading this, that are alcoholics and that are working with others, it's a reminder that we need to be attentive to the problems of our loved ones. And I'll be honest, why would I get called into the, problems of my sponsees? Because I think I can help. Because I feel like I can fix. You know what I mean? And I can't fix. That's God's deal. But I feel more useful when I'm able to say, let's write inventory. But that might not be the dynamic that I'm able to have in a relationship. But I am still called to show up to be of love and service wherever I go. And so for those of us who are doing this work, it is a call to be attentive to our friends, family, partners, spouses, and their problems as well. And I will say too, I would have a lot of friends and some of them would be in the program and they would want to vent and dump. And guess what? Any human being can do inventory. And if you offer inventory as a solution, they'll stop bringing you their problems. So it's a win-win. I'm just kidding. Alrighty. So it says, we find it a real mistake to dampen his enthusiasm for alcoholic work. So it's a real mistake to discourage sponsorship or discourage working with others. It says you should. So, and the reason is because that's going to help more than anything else, but it says you should join in his efforts as much as you possibly can. So that's the direction. Dive into helping others yourself, because it's implicit that, it's not implicit, it's been explicitly stated that we would have been working the steps ourselves. Let's go help others. It says, we suggest that you direct some of your thoughts to the wives of his new alcoholic friends. They need the counsel and love of a woman who has gone through what you have. And that experience, whatever I bring to the table, I will use it to help others. It is the spiritual alchemy of the 12 steps. Regardless of if I'm an alcoholic or this is to the wives. The non-alcoholics who are as bound to their partner or friend as the alcoholic is bound to alcohol. You see, whatever I go through, if I go through these 12 steps, I take this course of action as a way of life. I will use it to help others. There is always somebody that I can help, but I've got to go through it and through the steps. I can't avoid it and help people. So that they need the counsel and love of a woman who's gone through what you have. My experience can benefit others. My pain can help others. My suffering can help others. And when that is my experience, that gives my pain and my suffering meaning and purpose. So it goes on to say, it is probably true that you and your husband have been living too much alone. For drinking many times isolates the wife of an alcoholic. And we've spoken again and again how this is an isolating, like alcoholism is isolating, not just for the alcoholic, but for their loved ones as well. And if you guys remember back to the 6 principles of success, one of those principles, I'm trying to remember if it's 3 or 4, but one of the principles is to maintain healthy relationships outside of the relationship with the alcoholic. Because this thing isolates. For us, it isolates us because there's nothing as important as getting that next drink. Doesn't matter whether I've been 3 weeks sober or in 3 weeks into a bender. Nothing is as important as getting that next drink. And for those that love us and cannot leave us, nothing is as important as trying to fix us or save us. So, of course, they would be wrapped up and drawn into that. So it says... It goes on to say, therefore, you probably need fresh interests and a great cause to live for as much as your husband. So that's the thing, is working, this way of life, these 12 steps, working with others. It is more than just a thing that I have to do. It becomes this way of life that has given life meaning and purpose beyond anything I could have imagined. What happens is fresh interest and a great cause. The ability to have our hand out to those who are drowning in the mire that is alcoholism, whether it's the family member for non-alcoholics or the alcoholic themselves. We get to have our hand out. We get to help them. We get to reach out to them. And when we see how our experience is of infinite value to those who are still suffering, man, that gives my life meaning and purpose. this thing is so much more than just don't drink. Because I can't just don't drink. This is a transformational process that brings my life to a place that I never thought possible. So it's as if you cooperate, so to work with rather than complain, which is just me focused on what I can get, you will find that his excess enthusiasm will tone down. We don't need to tone down the diving into 12-step work. We don't need it to tone down doing this thing. It's such a mistake to dampen that enthusiasm, to dampen that drive. And I'll talk about why for a couple reasons. The first is most human beings operate with momentum. And you guys remember me talking about the 10th step, the 11th step, prayer, meditation, evening review, amends, writing inventory. It is easier to continue to do something that I'm doing than to try to start doing it again. And that start, stop. And the more that I stop, the easier it is to stop. And the more that I'm still, the easier it is to stay still. But the more I take little actions and build that momentum and build that consistency, the easier it is to take action, and it builds momentum. And when we get into the chapter, The Family Afterward, it'll talk about the two extremes. One extreme is diving headlong into business, and they're like, don't do that. The other is diving headlong into spirituality. And sometimes I'll go to meetings and people be like, yeah, head in the clouds, but feet on earth. But what I want to point out is I don't see that extreme of diving headlong into this way of life and that often. And I think that's the way to go hard at this thing. And oftentimes we talk about balance, and we'll talk about the word balance is only found one time in this book, and it's found in the next chapter. And it's spoilers, it's talking about balancing working with others and family responsibilities. But a lot of times it's like, you got to find balance. And let me tell you what my experience is. If I have not recovered, if I've not gone through the actions of the 12 steps, I don't need balance. I need triage. You know what I mean? Like if you go to the emergency room, you're in the ICU. They're not saying, have you thought about crochet? You know, needlepoint. That's a thing to do. Do you like walks? They're like, you know, some a CC and a stat and a clear and all of that. It's like, that's where we're at. If I have not taken the actions of yoga. And if you want to do yoga, amazing. But yeah, and we'll talk about that. But yes, yeah, like they're not like, okay, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to reset your heart rhythm with the paddles, the shock thing. So before you do that, can you get into a downward dog and then do a welcoming the sun pose? You know, it's like, no, let's just give them the thing that they need to not die. That's where we're at. So if I have not taken all the 12 steps, if I'm not working with others, this is ICU. We got to treat it quickly so I don't got to worry about balance. And then I promise balance will find itself. I promise. Because I've had a couple people that are like, I don't want to be like you. And I'm like, in my head, why are you asking me for help then? Where it's like, all you do is help people. I'm like, fair enough. But you'll have spare time. If you want it, you'll have it. But here's the thing. The problem is when I talk about the word balance, I imagine myself as a server at a restaurant. And I've got all these plates, and I got the plates of family, the plates of friends, maybe the plates of work, recovery, all these plates, or maybe it's all these baskets, and I got to put my eggs in different baskets. But regardless, I am at the center, and I ought not be at the center of my life. There is no worse place for me to be than at the center of my life. So instead of finding balance, what I need to find is that God-centered path. Because I'll go on this rant when we get to that part of the book. But here's the thing: it's like when we talk about balance, gotta find balance. Does anyone know anyone that's found it? I don't know anyone that's like, I've found it, because it's not a static thing. There are times in our life where our family will need a bit more attention. There are times in our life where maybe career does need more attention. There are times in our life where we got to crochet it away. I don't know. And then there will be seasons where we get to work. We always have to work with others, but there will be seasons where we're able to work with more people. And it's not for me to figure out. It's just for me to go where God has called me to be. And so that's that idea where it's like, if I cooperate rather than complain, it will tone down. The balance will find itself. I don't have to figure it out. And it says, both of you will awaken. This is a little promisey. Both of you will awaken to a new sense of responsibility for others. And it says, you as well as your husband ought to think of what you can put into life instead of what you can take out. And if you're new to this idea, it's like, but what about me? But here's what I know is like, when I'm living in me and I'm at the center, I'm living in a world of scarcity. There is never enough. There was never enough booze. There's never enough approval. There's never enough affection. There's never enough attention. There's never enough success, power, property, prestige. There is never enough. There's never enough instant gratification. And if it was so good, why does it only last an instant? You know what I mean? It's just never enough, just always one more. But when I rely on God and I get what I need from God, and I do that through these 12 steps, the world becomes one of abundance where there is more than enough. And you see, what happens is when I give, that's truly when I receive. So when I'm given to others, especially when I feel like I don't got it. So I'm given love when I feel unloved. When I'm given kindness when I feel like I have not experienced it. You know what I mean? I'm giving that, and I begin to awaken to the abundance of love, the abundance of approval, the abundance of what I think I need. Abundance. And it says, so as you, as well as your husband, ought to think of what you can put into life instead of what you can take out, inevitably. So when I focus on what I can give, when I focus on what I can bring, this is what will happen. Your lives will be fuller for so doing. See, again, it's not a theory that I will awaken to abundance. It will happen. And I don't know how many zeros your bank account will have or anything like that, but I'm talking about those intangibles. Yeah. Yeah. Well, 1 0. Well, that's better than negatives. Negative zeros, right? So inevitably, your lives will be full for doing so. You will lose the old life to find one much better. This is a new life, new way of life, not a set it and forget it deal. And I am doing better for time than I thought I would be. Surprising to anyone. I didn't think we'd get here. But what I want us to make a note is right now, this is the first place in the first 164, where we're talking about relapsing after coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's only going to be 2 more. It's not a common thing. Now, again, because in those early days, what are we talking about? We worked these 12 steps. That's what we focused on. And then carrying this message to others. And so, perhaps your husband will make a fair start on the new basis, way of life. But just as things are going beautifully, he dismays you by coming home drunk. And I can feel the person, like their heart sinking into their gut, Oh. And it says, if you are satisfied that he really wants to get over drinking, you need not be alarmed. Though it is infinitely better that he have no relapse at all, as has been true with many of our men, it is by no means a bad thing in some cases. So what are we talking about? There are times when we get complacent. There are times when we're not doing the stuff that we need to do, or we don't think we need to do it. That window of willingness closes. What opens the window of willingness? Well, I can tell you it's not me, because I have tried for years. I've worked with people and I've seen where their windows close, and I would do anything to crowbar it back open, and I don't got that power, no human power. What opens it up again is pain. And unfortunately, there are times, if we do survive a relapse, that relapse will bring about that awareness that, oh yeah, I know I got no defense against this thing. My only defense comes from a spiritual awakening. And sometimes that relapse can punch through the delusion and the denial and the how different I am. But if you're here today, we can hold up our experience to the symptoms that is alcoholism, and we can go after these 12 steps as a way of life, like our life depends on it, because it does, and we don't have to wait for that. And here is the direction. So if we're here today and we've relapsed, we're working with somebody and they've relapsed, what do we need to do? Here's the direction. So this is important. Highlight, underline, stars beside. Your husband will see at once, so not after a little while, right away, that he must redouble his spiritual activities if he expects to survive. So a lot of times when we talk about relapse, we almost it's like an episode of like Sherlock Holmes. It's elementary, my dear Watson. Let me follow the clues as to, what happened. Or like the game of Clue. Was it Miss Scarlet in the library with the candlestick? Like, what was it? Like, why did you relapse? I want to figure it out. But for an alcoholic to relapse, it's never what happened. It's not what happened. Because what happened is inevitable. For an alcoholic to relapse, that is inevitable. I will relapse. The only thing that will stop a relapse is a spiritual awakening that I grow and deepen. So the question is not what happened. The question is what did not happen or what stopped happening. So the relapse is always, what did I not do? And you can take the steps backwards and point it out. How many sponsees? Actually, a lot of times people are like, I've been to AA, it doesn't work. And I sometimes, depending on their mood, will ask them some questions. So you've done the 12 steps. Yeah, I did the 12 steps, they didn't work. Okay, how many sponsees were you working with at the time? Oh, no, I never had sponsees. Okay. Well, what was your daily prayer, meditation, and inventory life like? Were you praying every day, meditating every day? How was your evening review? Were you using your evening review in the morning to guide your day? Like, were you really moving with it? And they're like, no, I didn't do that. All right. Well, the 10th step, were we continuing that? Were we catching things? Maybe catching things as they pop? No. All right. Well, did we make all of our amends? All of them? No. They usually maybe did some of a 4, maybe a 5. You know what I mean? That's always the case. And so that takes away the shame of relapse, in the sense it is not that we're bad or immoral or did not want it enough. And it tells us what we need to do. So when we talk about redoubling our spiritual actions, our spiritual activities, I've got to do and increase, double the intensity what I was not doing. So you're sitting on amends? Let's go reach out to 10 people. Let's make those amends right now. Like if we were maybe doing some prayer, all right, let's double our prayer life. We got to build that meditation life. You know what I'm saying? Get sponsees. It's like, it's not what happened. It's what did not happen. So it goes on to say, you will not need to remind him of his spiritual deficiency. He will know of it. Again, we're kind of pointing to that idea of like, hey, pick a mindful time of pointing things out, and it goes on to say, cheer him up and ask how you can still be more helpful. And it might be like, cheer him up and see how I can be more helpful. Well, here's what I found is when people have come to me with a relapse or even a question of like, does this count as a relapse? Or, I'll tell you how and Lynn and I were talking about this the other day. I'll tell you how I answer that. It's like, I don't care about your sobriety date. I care about how you're doing now. And whatever just happened is a sign that we've got to redouble your spiritual efforts and we've got to dive in. So let's go. You can get better now. And that's that sort of cheering up. Like we can that I'm able to offer as like a sponsor, not as a spouse. That's probably not going to land. But that idea of like, let's focus on what we can do. Move forward and then the rest of it sorts itself out. And I say that from experience. It goes on to say, cheer him up and ask how you can still be more helpful. The slightest sign of fear and intolerance may lessen your husband's chance of recovery. So the more we try to be controlled, the more we feel like we're being controlled. And it doesn't work. It does not work. In a weak stepping moment, He may take your dislike of his high-stepping friends as one of those insanely trivial excuses to drink. Now, high-stepping is like pleasure-seeking, which is like rude. Rude that we got called out with that one, you know? So it's that idea that, like, we got to pick our battles. But also for us, reading this as alcoholics, did we drink because our partner or spouse criticized our high-stepping friends? No. We relapsed because we did not address the resentment. We relapsed because we didn't continue to pray to meditate. We relapsed because we weren't doing. That's why we relapsed. It has nothing to do with them, but everything to do with me and my spiritual condition. And so that's the message. So I'm just wrapping up. That's the message of hope. The message of hope is that, like, you can recover. You can get well very quickly, as we've spoken about. Regardless of what is going on around you, you can find the solution and then help others. And those of us who have recovered, it's our responsibility to help you. So that's it for me. Over to you, Vivian.